We have our special guest with us, Mr. Dr. Neil Fox. Welcome, Neil. Thanks for joining us.
That's an absolute pleasure. Good afternoon. Nice to see you both.
It's great you could join us. Thanks for taking the time.
Pleasure.
So good to see you. So we'll just crack on because I've been so excited about interviewing you, Neil. We worked together several years ago, and so what we just wanted to talk about is you, your life, and just to start off with, how did you get into radio? What was your passion? How did you start that career?
Well, I think like a lot of, I was unlike a lot of broadcasters in so much as a lot of people I've spoken to have sort of dreamt of doing this all their life, and I really hadn't. I went to school, I nearly joined the army, I did the commissions board to go to Sandhurst. I was going to go and spend 5 years flying helicopters in the army. I went to do a business degree at Bath University, and actually while I was there we had to do an industrial placement, and I ended up we're doing actually 2 industrial placements, and I did one of them in America where I ended up in Atlanta in 1982. And I'd always loved music and sort of entertainment, and you know, I'd had teachers at school. One of my teachers at school wanted to be a pop star and then became a pop star, which is sort of unlike most French teachers, and he'd written some musicals and we had got involved with it. So I guess I'd always had a sort of leaning towards music and entertainment. I'd never really thought about it because that had nothing to do with my family. When I was at university and then ended up in Atlanta, I heard some amazing radio. And to put it in perspective, you know, British radio was pretty dull at that time. We had, in terms of music radio, we had Radio 1, Luxembourg still existed. ILR had started in 1973, but it was very boring. It was very housewifey, mid-morning shows. It was pretty dull, actually. And you went to America where it was this unbelievable supermarketed radio that was exciting, incredible, innovative, funny, entertaining, irreverent. Oh my God, it was everything that we weren't. And it blew my mind, to be fair. And I kind of went, and as a marketing guy, and there was a station I listened to distinctly, I remember it called Z93 in Atlanta. And I was sharing a flat with a guy who was 22, I was 21. He was from Chicago, I was from London. And literally this one radio station, every song it played, every ad it was broadcasting, every event it talked about seemed to be basically talking to me and my flatmate Jim. It's like our life, right? And we didn't have radio stations like that back home that you felt were really for you. And I thought, God, this is so well marketed. I want to go and do radio, but I want to do this kind of radio. This doesn't exist in Britain. I want to go and do this. And if I could do this, this would be really exciting and fun. And so I came back and finished my degree, got a normal, in inverted commas, job in Worcester, and I took it because there was a little radio station there called Radio Wyvern, part of that old ILR network. Yeah. And I'd work by day doing my normal job, and then in the evenings and the weekends, you know, I was doing radio, helping, answering phones, doing stuff, getting my foot in the door, and then they gave me shows, and then I got on air, and then I went full time. And then that's how I started. Little station there, quickly moved on to Luxembourg. 9 months in Luxembourg, I was on Capital, and then boom, off we went.
It's funny you should say that. I can relate exactly to what you said, because I remember going back a number of years ago where I used to go over to the States quite a bit. And in New York, they used to have a whole plethora of commercial radio stations, and they were exactly as you've described, very irreverent for sure, very funny. And I thought I used to record them and bring them home and play them to people. Go, yeah, this is amazing. I can't believe they get away with this. And it's
you know, American radio sort of, well, I always had been thinking of the classics of sort of Wolfman Jack and all those sort of guys back in the 50s and 60s. It was this kind of, it was your classic American graffiti type of DJ, wasn't it? There, and you know, we just didn't really have things like that. We had the Pirates. They were all very American influenced, of course, but I guess when I was in the 80s and I used to get a lot, and then I started on Radio Wyvern, you know, I was getting a lot of tapes from Kiss FM Los Angeles, which had Rick Dees in the morning, who was just a genius DJ. And you suddenly realize where the entire Steve Wright in the Afternoon show came from was Rick D show the morning before, because they were all the same characters, all the same gags, all the same voices. They literally were getting them sent over and just ripping them off, doing it brilliantly, but it wasn't, he was not being original. Rick Dees and his crew were being original. And then you had this thing called the Z Morning Zoo, the Zoo crew in Z100 in New York, who were, these two guys called Scott Shannon and God, who's the other guy? Dave, someone or other, who were just insane. And they had the whole idea of zoo radio, which, you know, we had over here, or well, we had a pathetic variation form of it really over here. Yeah. People used to call it zoo radio. They'd never heard the zoo. Otherwise, they'd never have called it zoo radio, because the zoo was friggin' insane. It was funny, brilliant. Oh, it was amazing. And that's what they had, the original one. And I used to listen to tapes of all that and just go, oh my God, this is unbelievable, because it was just pure entertainment.
Yeah. And energy, just so much more energy. That's what I used to love.
But it was, you know, everything about it was well done. The sport was brilliant. The news was brilliant. The marketing of it was brilliant. The hosts were incredible. It was just, you could understand why people wanted to wake up and listen to it. And you know what? There's a reason why not so many people wake up and listen to radio now, because it's friggin' dull. So
well, isn't it quite ironic though that it's quite ironic, I think, because, you know, the Americans are, you know, quite reserved in a lot of stuff, I've found. Yeah. So I've done a lot of speaking at conferences in various parts of the world, and I found that if you go there and say something a bit risque, it's almost like, ooh, they're sort of afraid to laugh. And, you know, the Canadians are afraid to laugh out loud, but the Americans are a little bit, yet. You know, I was working in the 90s for a company that owned commercial radio in Boston, WFNX, and they did lots of, like, you know, amazing stuff late at night. You know, probably, you know, I don't know how, I never heard your Dr. Fox shows, the surgery stuff originally, but I don't know, the same sort of thing. They were very much about late night dating shows, and it was very, you know, near the knuckle, should we say.
Yeah. Well, that was so, you know, that's what my original late night surgery, how I started the whole Dr. Fox thing, that was pretty, you know, near the mark. And it's just meant to be fun. It was just meant to be representative, really, of what young people were probably doing in London, going out and having a laugh. and yeah, you know, you listen to some of that American stuff, and it's very true, you know, to them, Benny Hill was risque, and that's why they used to love They loved Benny Hill in the 80s, and you kind of go, really? Just to see sort of girls running around in suspenders and stockings, they just thought it was unbelievable. It's kind of really, but then you go Howard Stern. And you go, wow. But you know, people forget that when they talked about Howard Stern, they think it's rude and you know, his interviewing style or the way he treated his guests. What they forgot was how clever he was. He knew exactly which buttons to push. He knew exactly how far you could take it. He was a genius. He still is. That's why they're paying him $125 million a year on Sirius, because the guy's amazing. Right. And I still, you watch him online. He's just, brilliant, you know. And we don't really have anything like that at the moment, you know. And I think it's interesting. I think radio has got itself, for me, in this country, in a bit of a mess.
The biggest risque thing I've seen in recent years on commercial radio, I think, was Christian O'Connell when he was on XFM. And he did this thing called the Sex Line Rodeo, and it was live on the morning, and he used to ring up a premium rate caller sex line, basically, and he had 3 listeners on, and they'd have to guess how long he could, on live radio, get this girl talking about nothing to do with sex. She'd be wanting to talk about sex, and he'd be wanting to talk about nothing at all to do with sex. And, you know, I'm a one-armed tennis table player, and it was obviously confusing the girl on the other end of the phone because it wasn't what she was used to. And the listeners had to guess how long she could go before she would say, Christian, why don't you, and they bleep the thing out. It was like a 7-second delay, I presume.
Right, yeah, fair enough.
Well, that was really risque stuff, 8 o'clock in the morning, commercial.
Well, it is, look, Christian O'Connell, Christian was brilliant and very clever. And, you know, I bet they would be dreaming that he was still doing the Absolute Radio Breakfast Show, because, you know, I don't think the Dave Berry Breakfast Show quite competes with that. You know, no. Crispy was very clever. He was very entertaining. It sounded like you didn't quite know what was coming up next. And when they laughed, they were like, you know, there's an awful lot of canned laughter and pretend fake laughter at breakfast shows now. They think, get a few people in the studio, just make sure you laugh at everything the host says or what anyone says. And that's what equals kind of that zoo feel. You go, no, it starts if they're actually saying something funny.
Yeah. It's risk adverse, isn't it?
Well, when you hear a lot of people now, sort of, they say something that's sort of, I don't know, it's what I call a smile line. It's a giggle, but they're all, they're belly laughing in the background. And you go, honestly,
so false.
And it does sound very fake. But, you know, that I think there's that feeling if we're all having a good time, the listeners will have a good time. And there is a certain amount of that, I agree with. You know, if you are genuinely having a great time in the studio, then I think your listener will hopefully be enjoying it with you as well. As long as you don't keep it all too much in the studio. I think the key is to help bring in the audience as well and share the gag with them.
Yeah.
So where did TV come from for you then, Neil? How did that come about?
TV, well, look, I guess, look, when I was at Capital in the 90s, I was, you know, I remember we were, I think like 90% of all teenagers in London sort of listened to Capital at that time. It was insane. And I was doing sort of the evening show, and you know, I suppose a lot, whether it's London Weekend or mainly the commercial TV channels, I was doing lots of appearances here, there, and everywhere on some of these stations, on some of those shows. Then I got my own show, which was called Dr. Fox's Video Jukebox, which I did sort of live as a live TV show on London Weekend television on a Friday night. People phone in, ask for a song, we'd have a chat and we'd play them the video, and you know, just what we did on the radio basically, because that had become a very famous radio show at the time. And then, you know, I was really, you know, I was very good mates with Simon Cowell when he used to run Fanfare Records, and you know, which was a label obviously part of Sony BMG. So I knew Simon well anyway, way before we'd been on telly. All the stuff I'd done with the Spice Girls in the sort of 90s and with Pepsi, so I knew their agency and I knew them, and that meant I knew Simon Fuller pretty well. So, and then I knew Nicky Chapman well, for example. So, you know, Nicky was, you know, a record plugger that I saw a lot, and then was a, you know, a senior record, you know, plugger for a couple of the big plugging agencies. So I know Nicky a lot. And then of course I knew Pete because we had a really good relationship with Stock Aitken Waterman. So literally they would test out all their records on, and like he'd literally phone me up and go, right, I'm sending you over a bike with a reel-to-reel on it. It's Donna, we've just done a song with Donna Summer. Can you put it on the radio? I want to hear if it sounds right. We're going to do a final mix on it. We'd play it on air so he could listen to it on air to work out to get the radio mix right. So we had a pretty good relationship with, so all those guys, for example. And then we'd been talking about doing a talent show. And obviously, because I knew Simon Cowell, Simon Fuller really well, I was just like part of the team. So they chose a team then based on, okay, I know how to be a manager. I know how to, what makes a great pop song, you know. So that was, Simon was the record executive, if you think. Pete was the record producer. Nicky really knew, you know, how to get them on the radio and TV, and had seen them from that side. And I was the guy that could pretty much spot a hit and hear a hit and knew, you know, how it worked on sort of radio, TV promotion. So we made a formidable team in a way. Plus we all got on really well. So when they put us all together and we ended up doing Pop Idol, you know, that it just, the chemistry was there and it worked really well.
Yeah, and it was a bit of a game changer on TV itself.
Yeah, it was.
It was, yeah. And although we'd kind of go, you know, yeah, it won everything. It won the sort of Golden Rose of Montreux. It won everything that first year, that first series. It did, which was great. But you also have to. We were lucky because at the same time there'd been a change in tech that allowed. What really helped Pop Idol was the voting. So you could watch a show, and whereas we'd had talent shows before, like Opportunity Knocks or New Faces, what made this one interesting was you could sit at home on a Saturday night and vote. It would cost you 5p, and instantly we knew whether you'd voted. No one had to count votes. So we had that moment where you kind of went, wow, I'm watching a show, and an hours later, we'll find out who's saved and who's gone. And so that made it, basically, the TV became the amphitheater. You could sit at home like you're sitting around, and it was the thumbs up or thumbs down, who lives, who dies. And you had the power. The power went back to the punters for the first time ever. It was like instantly theirs. And clearly they lapped it up. You know, you think on the night of that first series final, so again, you know, obviously where it was Will Young against Gareth Gates, you know, that first Pop Idol final, there were 17 million votes.
Amazing.
It was insane.
And you just don't get that on TV now, do you? Those sorts of numbers.
Not those kind of numbers, but you know, I think the number of people who voted was literally incredible. And we had 17 million people watching the show, but it was the number of people that could take part and vote, and actually people felt, wow, I can actually have a say. I want Will to win, right? And then it was amazingly close in the end, but he won, right? And it was, he won, and people got involved in it. So I think that's part of why they really remember that as well.
Yeah.
Because they felt part of it. It wasn't a passive experience anymore, which TV had always been. It was a very active experience.
It was more like radio in some ways, wasn't it? That whole involvement and making that engagement.
Oh, completely. It was, which radio had always done very well. And suddenly this was live TV, you could vote. It was very much, so Ant and Dec were very good at doing that too.
Yeah.
Doing that live host and making it feel, so the whole thing worked so well. It was unlike TV that we'd had before.
Yeah. But then you stayed with...
Sorry, carry on.
I was going to say, you then stayed with radio though. You obviously career with Capital and then...
I did. Look, my career, I got a great, amazing contract with Capital at the time. Things were going really well. And then with Pepsi, I had another contract, and the Pepsi chart was still doing really well at this time. So, from 2001 was the first series of Pop Idol, and then I left Capital in 2005. And I'd been there, 18 and a half years. So that was a pretty amazing run, to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Richard Parker, who'd been my boss at Capital for a long time, who employed me when I joined there in 87, he had left and was doing some consultancy for other people. But I'd stayed really good friends with him. My wife and his wife actually were business partners, bizarrely, in a venture at the time. So and then his wife became like godmother to one of our kids. So we'd got a really good relationship outside of work as well. Still an amazing man in terms of his knowledge and passion for radio has not dimmed in any way. We still regularly chat.
He's still one of the most...
Go on.
So I was going to say, he's still one of the most scariest bosses I've ever had.
Yeah, well, he is scary. But scary in terms of he was only scary because he knew exactly what he wanted, and to a certain extent was ballsy enough to go, right, we're going to do it my way. And the reality was, of course, if it had all failed, then it would have all been on his head, because the pressure was on him. It was like, right, this is, if you want to be here and work here, this is my way of doing it. Get on with it or leave, right? Sometimes he said it in slightly more fruity language than that, certainly amongst the jocks. We'd all had some, I had my run-ins with Parky, some proper horrible run-ins with Parky, and survived, and we still stayed friends. But then, of course, him and I have been talking about, there was this station over at EMAP called Melody that was going to change. So we'd known there was a gap in the London market to do something like Magic, right? It didn't really exist. A sort of commercial radio too. That was a bit more chilled out and just, played a really good selection of slightly more chilled out songs with some great jocks. It just didn't exist at the time. And so Magic started, which was a culture shock for them when I went there, and it's a culture shock for me when I went there. But we took us a year probably to sort of start moving it around, and then it did become an amazing success story. It did become the #1 radio station. My breakfast show became the #1 breakfast show. It was like unheard and crazy that we beat Capital, we beat everyone.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, we did. And it because there were some really simple rules put in. We knew what we were doing, I suppose, and we just went and did it. And got on with it, and didn't deviate at all.
And you're now with Nation Radio. Tell us a bit about that.
I am. I mean, Nation's interesting, and so the guy that runs Nation Radio, called Jason Bryant. Jason, was a guy who was at Virgin, and he knows his radio. He's been around a long time. He loves radio, which always helps. And he'll say, if there's like the BBC, and then you've got Global and you've got Bauer, he said, we're the fourth group, but there's a big gap between 3 and 4. And he's very honest about it. But I think he's found Nation Broadcasting have found themselves a pretty good niche in using a lot of modern tech, really, a lot of voice tracking. And finding a niche in slightly smaller radio stations in different markets around the UK and working out how to make it a successful business. So they were in Wales and they've done very well. They've moved up to, you know, Manchester, Liverpool area, Glasgow, Edinburgh, and then obviously they bought quite a few years ago this thing called, well, a license for the Southeast, which was called Thames Radio, which I did about 9 months on, doing a voice track radio show, which was not great. And I left Magic by this time, and it was, yeah, I was building an app with some other people. We were building a music app, which was really fascinating, using actually a lot of the skills as a presenter and music to actually build something as an app, and then also a game you could play on Alexa that we built with the people at Amazon that was still on. It's good, it works really well, but that was interesting. But then I did sort of do this voice track station, and I always sort of said, I don't think a voice track breakfast show really works. You know, breakfast really needs to be, good morning, here we are. It's a great day. It's a crappy day. This is what happened last night. This is what's going to happen today. You need a sense of time and place and waking people up. And I didn't think really you could do it as a voice track show. I still don't. And that's why when I sort of was talking to Jason, phoned me up again last summer and said, look, we're wasting this license. What would you do with it? And so we had some ideas, and I had some ideas. And then I brought in Mike Reed, who I was doing some work with on a thing called the Heritage Chart at the time. And so Mike ended up doing the breakfast show, and I'm doing the Big Ride Home sort of drive show. And then we brought in some other guys that we knew, Russ Williams, great jock, who'd been with me at Capital and then Virgin and Absolute, and then Neil Francis, who'd been with me at Capital and Virgin Absolute. Right, some really good jocks and a good team. So we wanted people that could talk, had a brain, you know, because I do feel now there are a lot of jocks out there now that don't know how to communicate. All they know is, in a way, how to sort of do liners, and they have no say in the music they play whatsoever. Here is a very, you know, radio's become very centralized. I kind of understand why they've done it. None of the decisions made in the last 10 years about radio have ever been about making the radio sound better, but they've been about how to make it more efficient and make more money or for it to cost less. But it's never been about, I've got a brilliant idea that's going to sound amazing. So a lot of it's all been about consolidation and, you know, cost cutting in many respects. And I think there are, you know, a lot of younger broadcasters now that would probably just love to have the chance to speak and chat and have some fun. And all the stuff I heard growing up listening to those amazing radio stations, man, they ain't going to be listening to that, are they, anymore? And so kids now, consequently, under 30, they don't listen to radio. They don't listen to radio. You know, they don't. And they don't because, A, it sounds a bit boring, and B, the playlists have got so narrow now. I think commercial radio's got so paranoid about streaming platforms. And so the old rules of keep a quite tight playlist have got even tighter now, so that their thing is, if they do listen to Capital or Smooth or Hot or whatever, or any radio station, you know exactly what you're going to get at any one time. But the problem with that is, after 45 minutes or an hour, you've heard the playlist, then it just rotates. And so it's kind of, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? We used to, even back in the 90s, me and Tarrant were always like giving Parky a hard time, and to be fair, he'd give us a very hard time back, about going, hey, the biggest question listeners to our station will always say when we're out doing gigs or whatever, they'll always go, why don't you play the same songs all the time? And we say, why don't we play twice as many, half as often? Wouldn't that be a good thing? And the argument was when they dip in, they want to be hearing the big songs that they love and know. Yeah. But that's also the same reason that slightly turns them off, I think, quicker as well now, is because you just hear the same songs over and over and over again. So it's an interesting one. It's a bit of a conundrum. Nation, we've tried to go, we know we're a small radio station, but growing, with some jocks that can talk, that have got brains. We actually, weirdly, we can change the music around ourselves. Our core's 70s, 80s, 90s, really, but we can play anything from the 50s, 60s, noughties to today, but just use our brains. Okay, we're programming probably to a mainly 40 to 65 audience. So just think, play big songs that they know and love, and surprise them with some interesting stuff, and use our experience and knowledge that we've all got at least 30 years on the radio. You know, those guys between, obviously Mike's 40 years plus easily, and then, you know, God, I've got 35 years, and then Russ and Neil, we all know radio, we all know songs. So let's make it sound like it's our show. So Neil Francis' show, because he's a real soul boy, does sound a bit more soul-y than Russ, who's probably a bit more Delamitri and Brit rock. And Mike's probably obviously a bit older because he's 73, so he's just playing a slightly older selection, but all around a sort of a core. But you know what, there are no real rules about 10-second links, or, you know, say what you want when you want, and we're all smart enough to know if you've got nothing to say, shut up and play a song, you know. So it's not rocket science. We're only doing
have you seen COVID affect radio at all in the last 12 months? Because I work particularly in the newspaper industry and globally, and it's been massively affected by, you know, no advertising coming through. And how's that affected radio?
Well, I think, look, in terms of listening figures, there's been no rager, amazingly, for the last year, because that requires people to go around door to door and hand out books. So there's been no rager, but everyone knows from any informal survey they've done, radio's gone through the roof because people are bored. They can't, there's only so much Netflix and Sky and Amazon Prime and telly you can watch. And the radio's wonderful company, so people have probably been listening a lot more. It skewed the radio graphs, which was always a peak at breakfast, and then it would sort of go down a bit, slight peak at lunch, go down again, a peak at drive time, and then tail off. So you just had these sort of bumps. Now it's far more, people start listening later, and then it has this much smoother curve across the day, it seems, because people sort of turn it on, they're just listening to it. You know, it's at home a lot more. They've got more time to listen to the radio. But yeah, obviously advertising's been decimated. No local advertising at all on these stations. National, I mean, look, the government have been shoving gazillions at getting the message over. So thank God the public advertising budget has been high. And everyone's been able to help survive because of that. But yeah, look, Nation Radio, we've launched a radio station in January.
Yeah, exactly.
With no studios. There are no studios. The company Nation now has no studios, has no HQ apart from where the transmitters are. So, and that's how it'll be. They run all these different radio channels. Everyone's at home. I'm in the shed, you know, with a system that I can now talk to the world on, which is crazy.
And do you think that, with that in mind, do you think the whole, you've been involved in so many massive live events with radio. Do you think that's going to come back at all in any form, and how it used to be, the road shows and all the rest of it?
Well, it's got to. I think they're expensive to put on, but people are desperate to get out there again. I think Capital, and when we were in our heyday, we were always out there doing road shows and big events, and then we started doing the big parties in the park and stuff like that. But we're always out with road shows and stuff, because actually getting out and meeting your listeners it's still really important. Just getting out there so they can see who you are. Just, giving them, it sounds crazy, but, giving away stickers and leaflets and stuff. Just so that you become real. You're not just some intangible thing. You're a real thing. Spotify's amazing, but Spotify's not out there. Spotify's not got DJs. It's a wonderful piece of tech and it's brilliant, but suddenly a roadshow turns up and it puts a stage down, and there's the jock who's doing your drive time show with a couple of bands that you know of, and you're giving away some t-shirts. It's fun, and that hasn't changed. So I'm sure Capital, for example, are desperate to get back and do Party in the Park and the Jingle Bell Ball and all the big stuff, what do they do, the Summertime Ball and Jingle Bell Ball? Of course they want to get out there, because it gives them something to talk about as well, something new that's coming up. Gives you tickets to give away. It's that whole thing. We're doing something great. You want to be there. Here's a ticket. Here's a brand we can pull in. Coke are our sponsor. Come along. Have a great day. We'll show you all the highlights on the video. Come on our channel. Then we can talk about it for a month afterwards. It gives you a real sense of excitement.
I'm interested in what
big stations. A smaller one, it's hard though for smaller stations, because it's expensive getting out there. I think it's going to be a long time. God, I hope we get out and have some live music this summer. But I think we're all, I think maybe by the end of summer that might be we'll be more normal. Everyone's going to be jabbed up by then, and hopefully we'll be out if there are no increases in, infections and what have you. But, I guess everyone's just watching it now, hoping, and for the hospitality industry, just hoping they can get out and just get some money flowing in again for all these promoters and bands as well. All these bands who they make no money out of selling records anymore because no one buys records anymore. So they are, if you're doing well on Spotify, you can earn money. If not, you're shagged at the moment as an artist. So they're desperate to get out and play some gigs, big and small.
I'm interested to know what you think of, something you touched on there. So future technology, before you came on earlier today, Penny and I were talking about something we touched on the show a few times, of augmented reality. And I was reading something from BT last week saying about the future technology of volumetric video and augmented reality, and giving you an experience at home as if you're actually sat there in broadcast quality video, broadcast quality sound, giving you an immersive experience, which is not going to be the same as obviously being there. But they're also taking that technology to, if you're at a sporting event, say, as well, you can actually, through a much cheaper version of proper glasses now, using the augmented reality technology of all the broadcasted data feeds that they use on TV now with assists and everything else, you can get this on your phone, on your glasses, if you like, your normal glasses. I'm just wondering, what's your thoughts about future technology with radio? Do you see anything coming through which you think, that sounds really interesting?
Well, I do think, look, I think human beings, I think ultimately, today we're doing this on the day that the world started to open up, or certainly the UK started to open up. We were allowed to meet people. When they started chatting to people yesterday on the news about what are you most looking forward to about today, and today, we're not back to normal. We're just 2 households can meet outside, or maybe 6 of you, right? So it's not like a massive change. Even that change got people excited, because what were they going to do? They were going to go outside and they were going to hug their friends, be with their friends, have a picnic in the park. Human beings need to have company. We are animals, right? We're social. So the idea of doing everything at home and doing everything virtually, it's like doing Zoom. This is okay. It's clever tech. It's not the same as sitting around a table and having a cup of tea and having a chat. It really isn't the same, but it's really useful and clever. Like, do I like doing my radio show from a shed? No, it's shit. I want to be doing it in a studio where I've got a producer and some people around me where you can have some fun. So it's all a bit make-believe in many respects. And I think, with all tech, there's going to be some amazing stuff out there. There really is. With AI and augmented reality, and we can do those experiences. But I could pretend to jump out of a plane and it's all really clever. Well, look at me. But you know what? You're not going to shit yourself like you would if you're jumping out of a plane. I know that sounds really weird, but okay. The adrenaline's not going to be pumping as much, is it? Do you know what I mean? So there are sometimes we've got to go and do stuff, and I still think humans will still need to experience stuff. Specifically to your question, are there things changing in radio? Look, tech's changed radio now. Nation Radio is never going to have studios. I'm sure there are an awful lot of radio stations now will never go back to having, sadly, a place of work where you go and I'm in the studio and the next guy comes and we hot seat change. How are you doing? You're right. I think in an awful lot of places that just won't exist anymore, which I have to say is really sad. Like a lot of offices won't exist anymore because you know what, we can do it all at home. A bit boring though, isn't it?
And what's your feeling on podcasts?
Podcasts, look, I think most podcasts that are made are dreadful, aren't they? Let's be honest, they really are. There's some really good ones out there, but look, I can go and buy all the football kit in the world, all right, and put it on. I'm a Chelsea fan, so I can go and get the latest kit, latest boots. I'm still going to be a crap football player. You know what? But I can look good. And I think that old expression of all the gear and no idea is, which people used to say about golfers, right? It's just as relevant for podcasters too. I think, you can either broadcast or you can't broadcast. But I tell you what I love about it. I love the idea that someone can be sitting around a table, and if they are interesting and they want to maybe bring their specific subject to live, whether it's a newspaper, a business, an HR journal, I mean, whatever it may be, the brand show, you guys can sit around, we can discuss it, and people who are interested in that specific subject, this is not broadcasting, it's narrowcasting. So you're finding and that's the difference. You're finding your target audience and you're going, so you find this kind of stuff interesting. Well, then you will find our discussion interesting. And we don't have to dumb it down. So that's the good thing with podcasts. You can be very niche and very specific. I have heard some dreadful ones though, where you kind of go, you've got some nice equipment, great microphones. It's all very cheap now. We can do it all, plug it into the Mac, find a little desk, all brilliant. But the content's got to be good as well.
No, you're absolutely right. We in a couple of weeks, we've got a guy called Mark Thompson. You may well know, who's a CEO of the BBC for many years. He brought the iPlayer out into people, and he's recently was the CEO of the New York Times. And he's coming on to talk about the future of news media, etc. And I noticed that the New York Times is probably the go-to newspaper for most people in our industry to look at what they are doing in terms of what they could be doing themselves. And what he introduced to the world was everything from audio through apps and exactly what you've just said, concentrating on specific verticals where people go, I really love that vertical, I'm going to come back for more. It's cooking or also
whatever that may be. And actually, weirdly, the New York Times, that's the #1 podcast in the world, right? They worked out, they did something really specific and clever and worked out what do people really want to listen to. So but there are some fascinating things. I mean, I loved, before podcasts were audiobooks, and so we used to listen to Stephen Fry doing the Harry Potter books. That's unbelievable. We'd sit in a car with the kids driving down for 2 hours on a Friday night to where we had our sort of weekend house. And honestly, we'd spend 2 hours, we wouldn't speak. We'd just sit there in awe of listening to this book being read. So audio can be so compelling and so incredible when it's done right. I am working on something at the moment that, you asked me, do I think there are any innovations coming up in radio or whatever? Yes, I do. And it will be launched later this year, but and it's called Vamuzo. But I'm not going to say anything about what it does or what it is. But I do think there are things that will change fundamentally. I think radio has slightly. I wish radio would. One thing. I hope radio just stays being radio. I think at the moment there's too much video cameras making radio studios look like they're a TV set. And the problem with that is it sounds great when you've got a camera in the studio and you can see me doing the show. There's nothing duller than watching someone do a radio show. It's a radio show, right? The good thing about, and also the great thing about when guests used to come into surgery, of which we had them pretty much every night of the week, why they loved radio was because they could look awful if they came in. They didn't have to worry about what they looked like. It was all about, they could just be themselves. People relaxed when there wasn't a camera on them, particularly with female artists. They'd come in, it was, they were well used to going on TV, looking fantastic, hair, makeup, stunning. You don't have to do hair and makeup before coming onto a radio show. What you want is just to be able to come on at the end of your day, wearing a baseball cap, looking crap, chill out, get a cup of tea, put your feet up and have a really good chat and feel relaxed. Now, as soon as you've got a camera pointing at you, you can't do that anymore. And I think what radio has always done really well is be great company. And to do that, I think you have to not necessarily have a camera pointing at you because it makes most people feel uncomfy. Even if you've done lots of television, like me, for example, I've done loads of TV. I'm sitting in a radio studio and there's a TV camera and someone's filming it. It makes you do the interview differently. It just does, however comfortable with the camera you feel. So
you see yourself going back to TV, Neil?
Would I? Oh, look, we're definitely yes, I would. I love TV, and it's very different from radio. But I want to be in control of what I do now. So there's a show we're trying to put together and sell at the moment, which it's to do with music and motorcycling, and two of my passions. But I want to be in control of it now, because I think the problem of the idea of just being along and being a paid for presenter, I don't really want to do that anymore. Turn up and you get your money, but someone else is making all the dough and making all the decisions. I don't really want that. It's sort of nice to be sort of really in I suppose in charge of my destiny.
Well, we wish you good luck with that for sure. And if anyone listening is not aware of Nation Radio, how do they find you?
Yeah, well, Nation Radio we're on DAB on lots of parts of the UK, Southeast, Portsmouth, Southampton, but just have a look at nationbroadcasting.com. But like nowadays, we've got a new app out. The new Nation Radio player is out, so you can sort of download that. We're online, we're on app, on DAB, so you can listen to us. It's easy to find. That's the great thing now. There's no excuse. But I think that, I would say we're a good listen for people because not too many adverts, broadcasters that know how to talk, playing some really good songs, and it's not the same ones each and every day. Yeah. So you do, it's getting a really good reaction, but we're also really smart. It's never going to be the biggest thing in the world. But it's going to, as I said to the other, because I'm sort of helping put the station together, but I guess I sort of have with Jason. I sort of said to the guys, look, are we ever going to be the #1 radio station in the UK? Of course we're not. Dream on, right? Because we haven't got the marketing budgets to do that, but we could be the best radio station. So, you might not be the biggest, but you could be the best. That's a great thing to aspire to be, make the most interesting radio, doing good links, great content, playing some amazing music. That would be a job well done, because I still think there's a gap for that as well.
Yeah. I think there's a massive gap for that. I think that, as you say, the bigger groups have cut costs in other areas, but they've not invested then in content, whereas what you guys are doing is something different. And I think it will come back round. I really do. I think people are bored with a lot of commercial radio at the moment. Yeah,
look, it's I think what Ashley Tabor and co have done at Global has been very clever. I think they've been, Ashley, I mean, God, I've known Ashley since he was 16, and bizarrely, and this wow. Ashley, I remember, came in and was our T-boy, random's that for me, because he was obsessed and loved radio. He loved it, and he wanted to get into it. And so he'd come in and he would help, and he was really good, and he was passionate. And what I love about Ashley is still passionate about radio and entertainment. So it's not, I know he's a wealthy guy, but it's... Well,
they've expanded in America now.
You what, sorry?
They've expanded in America, haven't they? Bought, iHeart.
He just loves radio and always has. And of course, it is a big business if it's run well. They as a group have obviously made a decision, but the old ILR, you must have your local small stations. I can understand why a lot of those, because they weren't very good, why they've ended up being absorbed by the biggers. I mean, it's a shame in a way that they're all capitals, or they're all hearts, or they're all whatevers, or they're all kisses, or they're all magics, or, they've just become lots of big brands. But in reality, that's how big brands want to buy stuff, right? You're one sales house, you just look, I can just get the whole UK. I want 30 to 50 demographic. Okay, I'll be buying that one. Thank you. It's made it easy. It is a business after all. This is not a charity. So, but I think that's come at a cost, and the cost is that we are missing, everything sounds the same. That's the problem. So much of it sounds pretty bland. And it sounds pretty bland because you can't make it local specific. And, some of the ILR used to have some real good characters on, certainly at breakfast, certainly late night. They often have their local characters on that were great on the phones or whatever, who would have, you go up to sort of Metro FM in a day, and they had a really good guy doing the late show. And he was such a real brilliant Geordie that clearly it's where he grew up. He knew his audience, he knew who they were, and he was talking their language. And of course, now you have sort of just some big old bland noise going out that can't offend anyone. It's sort of acceptable everywhere. But what that probably means is it's not really exciting anyone either. So, sometimes it's quite good to be Marmite. Love them or hate them. At least they know about you.
You're right.
Yeah,
it's all definitely a bit too vanilla, then it just becomes a bit whatever,
Well, listen, I don't know, Pemba, I've got one more question for you, if that's okay. And that is, if you're a young person listening into this, Neil, I know certainly from the newspaper world, we've seen lots of redundancies, and they say never waste a good recession sort of thing, and the whole COVID thing. There's lots of people who have lost their jobs because of all of this.
Sadly,
and radio is probably no different. And you're left with the big groups like the Bowers and the Globals. And do you think there are still opportunities for you? If you're a young person want to get into radio now, how do they get into it? Do you think there's good opportunities still for them?
Well, I guess it's never been easier to make a demo tape. All right, if that makes sense, right? So everyone's got a computer, smartphone's got a microphone on it, it's got a video camera on it. So tech means that we can plug a little microphone into your computer and you could practice. There are apps, there are all kinds of stuff you could, with record decks. We know we can get 55 million songs, don't have, for $7.99 a month through Spotify. Yeah. So the bare resources of what I would need to maybe make a demo tape or pretend to be on the radio are accessible to everyone now, which is great, which wasn't before. What's interesting is whether young people want to be in radio, because they're not listening to it anymore. So why do they want to be on it? Right. So because you go, if you don't listen to it very much, maybe what would make you think I want to be a jock on the radio? Yeah. But I think there are lots and lots of small, they might not be commercial radio outfits. There are lots of little local community radio stations, small licenses, small low power DABs, community, hospital, university radios. There's still an awful lot of opportunity out there if people want to do this, to get involved, but also there's more chance ever now they can sit and practice at home, which you couldn't do before because you couldn't buy the tech. The tech now is cheap, so you can at least have access to it. So I guess for somebody who wants to do it, you can certainly practice enough. And then like a lot of things, I think you've got to have two skills in life, whatever job you decide to go into. One of it's a skill to do what you do. So maybe you've got to learn to be good on the radio, and that only comes with experience. But the other one, that people have to have a skill at getting on and working out, okay, how do I get onto that? How do I get noticed by those people, or how do I get noticed by that newspaper? Because I write really good stuff and they say I'd make a really good journalist. How do I get to be the editor of a paper, or to be a brilliant journalist? So, and that's a skill in itself, trying to work out, okay, how do I do this, and how much am I going to hustle, how much am I going to literally be willing to not feel that I am some privileged little kid, or that I am, the world owes me a job. It's like, no, I'm going to go out there and graft and literally work 7 days a week when my friends are going out. I'll do evenings, I'll do weekends, I'll do anything that it takes, because I still think it requires, to get the really fun, interesting jobs, that kind of commitment. Certainly want to be a football player. Football players, you're not going to do it by playing FIFA on your backside in the lounge. You'll do it by getting out and just kicking 1,000 free kicks every day, like David Beckham used to try when he was a kid. So and that's how footballers will be brilliant, and how they can then go and play for clubs and get paid 100 grand a week. Graft, right? So, and I think there are other in other areas of work, I think you get the impression, and I've got 3 kids now, that that's not quite how it is. That they're different generations slightly feel that they are slightly more owed, maybe, a living by.
And also expectations are much higher with technology, even just down to a smartphone in the hand.
It is. I think also what's really weird about this sort of tech generation is that what they've seen a few, because it is only a few, young people come up with really smart ideas, be clever enough to find other people that believed them and invested in them and have changed the world, like Zuckerberg with Facebook. But there's only one Mark Zuckerberg. There aren't many people. So when you think Zuckerberg, Instagram, WhatsApp, there aren't hundreds of these people. There are just a handful of these people that have, at a very young age, changed the world. And tech, I suppose, has allowed people to not necessarily go through, the idea of getting a job, which we probably did when you were 18. Your parents were, what sort of career are you going to go into? And you had careers advisors at school. There was almost the thought you'd go into a job and you could be in that job, sort of, or that career all your life.
Yes, exactly.
I think they get told very different things at school. Is you're going to have many different jobs and many different careers in your life.
I took a media tour around Silicon Valley, and we went to Google's head office, and they told us that the average shelf life, if that's the right phrase, of one of their employees now, all under 30, is about 18 months, and they move on, or they're asked to move on. Or
you haven't realised my potential. I'm going. Someone else will discover me. But I still think, for even all of those big jobs, there are still lots of people around who have been grafting, who are some people will make it and will literally fly, but there are an awful lot of people won't. And I think, you know, like a lot of, I've got, you know, a 19-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a nearly 15-year-old. And, you know, for them going into the jobs market, it'll be a very different jobs market than the one I went into, and that was around when I was a kid. And in fact, even the sort of their headmasters and headmistresses at their school are saying, we're actually, certainly for my youngest one, they're going, we're now teaching kids and giving them skills for jobs that don't even exist yet. You know, because, you know, which is true, you know, who knows what's going to be around in a few years' time, because where we'll be with tech and what jobs will, look at the high street now, how it changed. It was, you know, it's suddenly become full of, it's literally coffee shops, charity shops, phone shops. That's pretty much what the entire high street is nowadays, isn't it? On betting shops, sadly. But, you know, 10 years ago, it was a very different landscape. So people are just, things are changing, and they always will change, you know. This is a particularly fast time of change, though, I think we're in now. This is, if there was the industrial revolution, this is the tech revolution. It really is.
And the pandemic has just accelerated that. You know, we were, you know, young people were encouraged to get jobs like in cafe and pubs, because you'd always have a job then, and then who would have expected that they all closed? And I think it's very tough for young people, and almost the choices are too great, and there is too much temptation of kids that are making lots of money on TikTok and Instagram as, you know, thought leaders and everything else. It's I think it's a really confusing world for young people.
Yeah, no, it must be because there's lots of opportunity out there, and sadly a lot of the opportunity feels like you could make an instant fortune out of it. So if you become a big TikTok influencer, or suddenly, wow, you think, wow, what, they're literally just telling me what makeup to wear, and they're earning £1 million a year. You're having a laugh, really? You know, and you got to go, and
it is that instance, so that, you know, the young people now want things faster and faster. And, you know, one of the things I say to my son is, things take time. You have to be more patient if you really want to get where you want to be.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, but I think that's something that it sounds like an old person's thing to say to your kids, doesn't it? Like, you know,
it does.
Believe me, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. Takes a bit of graft, you know, but it does, because there will be a few people that are big influencers that are making money, but, you know, they require the model. You want to sort of point out, the model requires that millions of people watch TikTok every day, with a few people making the clever videos. The only reason they can get that is because millions of people are watching them, so their CPM is big, right? So if everyone was a doer and not a watcher, no one will make money. So you have to sort of point out that the obvious, I guess. But it's certainly it's a fascinating market. But, you know what, I always try and go to anyone I ever speak to, everything still comes down to content, right? Whatever you watch, whatever you listen to,
100%.
If you're really good, and people want good content, they will find it, they will listen to it, they will enjoy it, and then they won't enjoy cheap shit after time. And I think what's been very interesting about, and if you listen to, the one bad thing about podcasts, I would say, about the podcast world that we're in at the moment, is there's some dreadfully produced stuff out there. Same with TV. But you kind of think, just because I've got a phone that is HD quality and I could actually film something on that could go on TV, that doesn't mean I could film something on that and it will look good on TV. And the problem is, I think, you know, there's some great technology out there that allows people to do some clever things, but you've still got to know what to do with it. And I think there's some really shoddy production out there for radio when I listen to it, for podcasts out there, and particularly for TV, some real awful dodgy stuff. But 50% of all stuff watched on YouTube is uploaded videos from people, which is basically stuff from phones. So people are the quality threshold's way down. So people are quite happy to watch pretty shoddy stuff sometimes.
In some strange way, they think it's more real.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and suddenly it's a really good example. A friend of mine was one of my old producers. He became an amazing photographer, and he does this photography show which he films. He lives up in the Isle of Skye in Scotland, which is a particularly beautiful place to photograph. And with 2 other people, they put this great video TV show they do. They do it every month. They bring out a new episode. It's an hour. And his biggest criticism that he's got is it looks too good. He said, one of the feedbacks you get, it looks too good. And he goes, how can it look too good? Well, because it looks, you've shot really nicely, the lighting's good, everything's good. It looks like it's professionally made. And he goes, yeah. And why would that be bad? But it's exactly what you said. It's almost, I want it a bit crap because then it feels real. And he goes, well, why can't we just make really good quality stuff cheaply too? But sometimes, you know.
Well, Neil, we've run out of time.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's great.
It's gone like that, which just shows what a great guest you've been, because time just disappeared on us. So thank you so much for giving up your time.
That's a pleasure. Very nice to see you.
Really interesting.
And I'll just say, as a Liverpool fan to a Chelsea fan, I hope you finish 5th this year. And we've just beaten the Champions League spot. I don't think it's going to happen, though.
All right. Well, yeah. And as a Chelsea fan to a Liverpool fan, I'll say nothing.
Well, we'll look forward to hear about your new project in due course as well when you come.
Right,
maybe you'll come on again.
We'll hear about it. Okay.
Thanks very much for now.
Have a lovely day. Thanks.
And you.
Bye.
Bye.
Ray, what a great guest.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, you can listen to it all afternoon, and it's been about an hour talking to him, which is great.
Yeah, indeed. So this is, you can listen to this again on the ukbrandshow.co.uk. And we've got another fantastic guest coming up shortly, haven't we? In fact, we're back in 2 weeks now, a break next week. But next week, we're back with, a week after, sorry, which we'll be back with Mark Thompson, the guy I mentioned to Neil just then. So he is former CEO of the New York Times. He's going to be talking about his career. He's been, Director General of the BBC, brought the iPlayer to the world. Now he's CEO of Ancestry.co.uk, on the board of a major media company in Germany, and we talked to him lots of different things. So it's one not to be missed as well. So we'll see you Fantastic.
then.
Yeah, great show. I hope we can get Neil back to talk about his next project.
Definitely. Yeah, we'd like to hear it. So anyway, everyone, thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
See you soon.
Bye for now.
Bye.